We are doing a combination of a wildfire related needs assessment and the development of a wildfire related peer learning sharing project coordinating network for the Pacific Islands area or Western Pacific. We haven't landed on exactly how we're going to label and talk about this, but I think you get the point here. It's funded by the Forest Service, Barb's division. So it's Cooperative Fire and Aviation Management who is funding the work. And then Hawaii Wildfire is leading it. So Heather, you can go to the next slide. This is kind of an understatement and also singing to the choir, but basically because fire in the Pacific Islands area is becoming an increasing concern, there were a lot of partners that we've been hearing from over the last few years who really wanted to see the needs and priorities identified, the infrastructure established, the collaborative networks developed to kind of catch up with that increasing risk and awareness. And so that's really what we're aiming to do. The project goals specifically, actually before we identified exactly how we were going to do it, what we knew are these three things. We wanted to have a kind of a shared or a foundation for shared understanding of what the wildfire needs and priorities are for each of our partner areas across the Pacific, or at least the US affiliated areas to start with. We had interest from our partners, some of them you guys, who have jurisdiction throughout the Pacific, in knowing what the values at risk are, where people are at in terms of their needs, their wants, their awareness. And in the end, talking about it with Lance and Wendy at the Forest Service and Cooperative Fire, it was clear that having that kind of needs assessment done would be helpful for the Forest Service to know how best they can support. Hawaii Wildfire is interested because we are available and wanting to be of service, but we don't know as many people as we could, and people don't know us. And we just want to make ourselves available, and it helps to really have a sense of who's who and what everybody's needing and wanting. And also each area so far that we've been working with, it's really clear that it would be helpful to have a comprehensive articulation across lots of stakeholders and interests related to fire about where to go next, within each area. So it's kind of a win-win across the board to pursue this. We also knew that there across the US, across Australia, in lots of places, the most effective way of moving toward wildfires is through collaborative work, because it affects so many different jurisdictions, land areas, professions, et cetera. So since there's this opportunity right now, we're at the beginning, it makes sense to set the Pacific Island area on a trajectory of collaboration, cross-boundary work, et cetera. And because we have this people goal and this kind of document goal, we thought, well, why don't we use the development of the needs assessment to also get to know people, build relationships? So we've been really intentional about relationship building along the way, so we can build that long-term collaboration, and also just the foundation for the launch of the Pacific Island Area Collaborative Network. You can go to the next slide, Heather. But how we decided to do that, I sort of alluded to it, but we have these two deliverables we're aiming for. We want to have a document that identifies the needs and priorities of each of these areas. We're starting off with CNMI, Palau, FSM, Guam. We'll build American Samoa and other areas in over time. But we really decided that the document will be, we'll have this initial draft of the needs assessment, but we'll have ongoing additions as everybody learns more. We wanted to have that full spectrum of stakeholders involved. The forest action plans have some wildfire priorities identified, but it's specific to forestry, and they haven't all been ground truth. So we just wanted to kind of deepen and supplement what already exists with more information. And as we reach out and meet with all kinds of people, we are pursuing 4 lines of inquiry, basically needs and priorities and values as it relates to the 3 strategic cohesive strategy categories. So people and communities, land and water, and firefighting. And then we're also adding in kind of the needs assessment part for science, info, and tech needs. And then as we do that, we're meeting people, we're getting to know folks, we're inviting them to participate in the Pacific Islands Area Wildfire Network, which we'll be launching soon. And the network is really just like all the other collaboratives and coordinating groups that exist for fire purposes. It's about sharing resources, motivation, having a mechanism for technical training and workshops, and that sort of stuff, and project coordination. So we can go to the next slide. We went into this knowing that it wasn't going to be a one and done, super quick, glossy report that was robust from the start, because everyone's needs and understanding of fire is different across the region, and also our ability to connect over time zones and cultures and languages. We knew that some areas were going to be easier to unpack than others. So, you know, the initial draft is going to have a variety of depths of information depending on the readiness and where everybody's at with wildfire in general. So it's not super cut and dry. It's rather going to be, you know, we're approaching it like it's a long-term learning process for everybody, and it's ongoing, but there will be a document that everyone can refer to, and we're going to put it into a format where it really can continue to be updated and added to along the way. So this connects to PFX in a bunch of ways. The first is that, you know, we've already talked to some of you, and you're all invited to provide contacts for the interviews, the needs assessment, you know, anyone you know in the region who might be able to contribute or want to participate. And you can provide your perspective on things at any time, because this is kind of an all of us. This is really for all of us, our partners across the region included. And also specific to PFX, one of those 4 topic areas that we are doing the assessment for is directly serving as the PFX information and research tech needs assessment for the region. In the beginning, we, you know, a lot of us made the rounds and did exactly this for Hawaii. We've updated it over time, and this is kind of the foundation for the Pacific Islands area PFX needs assessment. So it's specifically a target area of what we're trying to learn about and how we can best serve them through PFX products. And then the network itself will serve as the mechanism to make sure people know about what PFX has produced and generated. It'll allow us to have a way to disseminate the information, to hold the workshops, to learn more about additional needs and hopes for new research that could be relevant to practitioners. And also, we're going to meet a bunch of people we already have that could eventually be, you know, a pool of candidates who might want to join the steering committee and guide PFX over time. So there's a lot of direct links with PFX. I don't know what the next slide is, Heather. Oh, I'm going to pass it off to Heather, because Heather, if you haven't already introduced yourself to this group, you might want to, so they know who you are, and then you can share the work that you've done on this so far. Oh, you're muted.
I'm muted. Thanks, Elizabeth, for sharing the bigger picture. So my name is Heather Forrester. I was hired on in February with Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization to conduct the needs assessment and start up this network. And I just wanted to acknowledge that there's been a lot of work that's gone into making this needs assessment happen, and just a lot of work that's been happening in the Pacific. So the first phase of the project was really to do some initial interviews with Hawaii and California contacts, so I could get some background, know what's existing, do a literature review. Second, I used some of the contacts that were shared, as well as others that I found in my literature reviews, and started doing interviews with those in the Pacific Islands area. And now we're really gearing up to start up a network. And the first network meeting will be in the later half of November or beginning of December. We're still finalizing a date for that. So the purple is where we're up to so far. Beyond that, looking at phase 3, we're going to complete just that initial draft of the Western Pacific Needs Assessment. As Elizabeth mentioned, this is going to be a living document, and you know, with all that's going on in the Pacific, it's hard to just have a plan or a document that's final. So any contributions over time are welcome. And then the continuation of the wildfire network. I want to acknowledge also with the network that the first round or first meeting. We'll probably have a few people, and then that can grow over time. Moving forward, we'll add to the assessment, the needs assessment findings as new information is gained. And then we'll begin to bring information, training, and speakers to the network meetings to carry on that portion of the project. And then from there, just keep going, working with the U.S. Forest Service on next steps. The Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization will work to coordinate and implement some of the needs that were outlined. And then you guys, PFX, will hopefully be able to have some new project ideas and move forward on those. So this kind of goes over the timeline, but where we're at right now is those the interviews that were done in Hawaii and California were really to gather contacts and understand what has been done in the Pacific so far. But the interviews that I'm conducting in the Pacific Islands area is really for the context. So my parents never taught me that talking to strangers was a no-no. So I think that that's why I'm really good at this job. I've been doing a lot of cold emails to people, trying to get interviews with them to better understand the situation in their respective islands and countries and figure out what's needed. And what's just so interesting to me is that something that we might think of as easy, like having safe equipment to use, might not be the case in these other places. So really making connections, building relationships is a big portion of this project. Doing literature review of existing material, and then also ground truthing that. Right now I've sent out some online questionnaires to kind of throw a broader net. Christine is one of the great people that, I have lead contacts in the different countries that I'm really relying on to help me throw that wider net to gather more information. So she's volunteered to share that with her contacts. Whenever possible, we'd like to do workshops. So far, we've been able to do, as part of in combination with another project, we've been able to do some workshops in Palau where we were able to take a deeper dive into the needs of that country. And in other places, we're hoping to do that in Guam and then other places as well. But there may be other methods that are more appropriate. So we'll just have to see. And then from all of those, we'll be developing a document. Just some preliminary findings from the interviews that I've been doing with those in the Pacific Islands area. We really need a better understanding or consideration for local uses of fire. Though there are problems with arson in some areas, there are a lot of stories that were shared with me where fire is used as a tool. So understanding that, how that fits in with the culture. More research and local knowledge is needed to really understand the right conditions to burn. This question came from someone in Yap, and then I turned to Clay and said, what's the right relative humidity? And there's just a lot more that we need to look into to be able to answer that question correctly in these countries. Firefighting gear that's being used in some of the islands is meant for structure fire, and so that's unsafe in the wildland firefighting setting. The need for proper PPE to protect personnel is vital. Oops. Whoa. There was also a need for smaller vehicles that had 4-wheel drive that can access some of the more remote areas where these fires are actually happening. There was a need for some specifically arson training and firefighting. And I know that Christine's organizing some arson investigation training. So hopefully that can help those people in need. It was also brought up that they'd like to see continuation of the mapping efforts. One example was that they've been building some green fire breaks, and they want to see over time if those are actually working. So tying that type of, boots on the ground action and looking at moving forward with the mapping, if that's actually working. We're really excited to start up the Pacific Wildfire Network, as I mentioned, in November and December. I think this will be a great tool for the region, not only for places in the Pacific Islands area to learn some situations from Hawaii, but vice versa. So just really sharing that information both ways. As I mentioned before, it might take a while to get people involved, but this is the start of it. So really excited about that. This quote was something that has always stuck with me. I was attending an invasive species conference where, we were looking at invasive species throughout the Pacific, and one of the presenters said, "The vast Pacific Ocean does not separate us; it brings us together." So because even though we're very far spread apart, we can all look to each other because we have similar situations, similar climates that maybe aren't similar with those in, mainland situations. So thanks for your time. And if there's any questions, Elizabeth and I are happy to work with answering them.
Okay. And thanks to Heather for all her hard work, because she's doing the heavy lifting on a bunch of this that's happened so far.